Hi, good morning and welcome to the ODC webinar. I'm Rick Thompson, Director of Operations for ODC. I've been with ODC for just over 4 years, having previously been at Trafford Housing Trust. A bit about ODC, been going for over 25 years, and I'd say 99% of our work is in the social housing space. The concept of today isn't for me to give you a sales pitch, but hopefully for you to learn from other social housing colleagues about the benefits of GIS. Today we've got Paul Dockrell, who's the Director of Energy and Programme Management for Walsall Housing Group. Then we've got Sam Stronach, who is Community Investment Officer for Cotsway Housing. And we have David Bezic, who is the GIS Manager for Cross Keys Homes. The format of the webinar will be me playing a video provided by each of our speakers, and then after each video is played, I will bring up the speaker so they can answer any questions you have. You will see on the right side of your webinar screen there is a chat area. This is where if you've got any questions, please post them. We will try to answer as many as we possibly can. Of course, we are limiting ourselves to an hour today, so if we have too many that we can't answer, what we'll do is we will send those out following the webinar today. The webinar is recorded. You'll be able to get a video of this afterwards that you can then share with your colleagues. So I guess let's get started. I hope you get something out of today, and yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, I'm going to play video from Paul. So here we go. I'm going to turn my camera off now and play Paul's video.
I'm Paul Dockrell, Director of Energy and Programme Management at WHG. We have a 21,000 housing stock, mainly of which is placed in Walsall. My responsibilities consist of investment planning in asset management, building safety and designing a carbon neutral roadmap. Geographic Information System Mapping has provided a number of benefits to WHG in 3 key areas. The day-to-day need to have fast, reliable solutions to producing property and estate mapping, to use GIS to understand better our management and investment of our communities, and to support the mapping and understanding of carbon neutrality across our housing stock. The day-to-day benefit is that we can acquire red line drawings for sales planning and boundary clarifications. GIS gets turned around in 15 minutes for a fraction of the cost. On a more strategic level, having a speedy response to GIS data has informed our decision process in a more strategic manner and provides the flexibility to understand and appreciate our wider communities. Over the last 2 years, we've invested in an asset performance evaluation tool, which helps us understand what our net present value is of our stock, where we have poverty levels across our communities, and what health and social values look like across our communities. The data can be overlaid with the GIS mapping, so we better understand hotspots within our communities and what we can do to develop strategies accordingly. And it gives a more visual understanding of high yield and low social value areas across all our communities. Smarter investment planning can then be understood better. The long-term opportunity of GIS mapping with investment planning means the possibility of regeneration. So when we look at our poor stock, our poor estates where they're not performing, we have a better understanding of what life expectancy looks like across our whole stock. Therefore, we can think about the long-term planning of regeneration of some of our communities and what that might look like, and to do some early cost modelling around what that looks like as well. So using data has become valuable to visualise investment. It helps us to understand where we right to buy has occurred within our communities and what that might look like in terms of cost modelling to reacquire and bring that back into our housing stock to be able to develop and create wholesale regenerations. We've also done work around digitalisation of our high-rise blocks. which means we've done a visual or digital twin of each of our high-rise blocks. We have 17 of those. And what that's predominantly helped us with is the building safety agenda. However, what it does do, it helps us with planning in the event of an incident occurring in one of our high-rise blocks. Not necessarily fire, but it may be a structural incident. But it would be, we'd understand the immediate area around one of those blocks and what impact it would have on that immediate environment. We've done some work with the West Midlands Fire Service, which included the digital model and GIS mapping, so that they can understand the logistics around one of our blocks and what that looks like. So if you've got industry, you've got schools, you've got communities already living there, that GIS mapping really helps us understand what that looks like, and those plans can be put in place prior to anything ever happening within those communities. So therefore, GIS also adds to building safety, and it also adds to what that might look like within the building safety case. So when landlords are developing those building safety cases for the new regulator, GIS is a better way of explaining what the community looks like in the wider context. So part of that mapping of the estates and what we understand from the investment planning is we can see what is available for regeneration. Now, we have over 400 garage sites, most of them quite small, most of them built on land that's not very good in terms of pre-mining or just awkward pieces of land that just don't fit within a community and sort of tucked away and out of the way, really. So those kind of pieces of land are useful to understand and know, because you can use them to help with your carbon neutral mapping tool. So when you analyse the stock and you understand what you need to invest in on the stock, you can also look at the land and see where those offset opportunities could occur. So where you've got a garage site it cannot be developed, you can use it for carbon neutrality reasons. So that might be put in small solar PV panels or a wind farm or whatever it is, but you can then use that to offset your carbon neutral stock. So that's our next piece of work at WHG. This is what we're going to use GIS mapping for next, and hopefully everybody else can see the same benefits. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to Paul for that. Unfortunately, we haven't actually got Paul join us yet. Obviously something's come up. What I can ask then is, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. If you can still put some questions in there, and if Paul does manage to join us, we'll get him back on to answer those questions. And if he doesn't, then we'll get the answers from Paul and send them over to you. So sorry about that. So what I'm going to do next is play a video we've put together with Sam. Bit of different format, and we will go with this. Okay, hi Sam, and thanks for joining me today. So Sam is from Cotsway, and what we're going to be talking a bit about today is how GIS is being used for community investment. It's very new to Cotsway and what we've been doing, but this would be a good session just to go through some of the bits we're doing and looking to achieve, and I'm sure Sam will talk through some of those bits with you. So over to you, Sam. Do you want to introduce yourself and who Cotsway are?
Yep, I'm Sam Stronach. I'm the Community Investment Officer at Cotsway Housing. Cotsway Housing, I had to do my research because I always forget how many houses we have, but we have 5,000 properties, 10,000 customers. We're relatively a smallish to medium-sized housing association. We were formed back in 2001, so we used to be the West Oxfordshire District Council housing stock, transferred over then. And we now have properties not just in West Oxfordshire, but Gloucestershire, Wiltshire and Worcestershire. Cotsway have always had a really good sort of community development, what used to be community development team at Cotsway when we came over from the council, and that's obviously since evolved into more community investment and what we can be doing in our communities. as other people know in our role, it's not just about the bricks and mortar, it's about creating that sort of sense of community. And I think I probably don't just speak for myself, but our day is probably never the same. We're always doing different work and different activities to support our customers.
Super. And what's your actual role at Cotsway, Sam?
Yep, so I'm the Community Investment Officer. We're a part of a team of 6. We predominantly have, I think, about over 55% are over the age of 55. So we do have predominantly older people in our properties. So within our team, we have 2 welfare officers. I'm community investment, so I'm looking towards the outside of our properties and into the community, and we have a community engagement officer who's trying to get our residents to be more involved in and have a voice within the housing association. So one of us is looking out, which is me, and one sort of looking in. And yeah, so we really work well together and complement each other. But I'm just the only one that does my role. I know within larger housing associations you have bigger patches and teams and antisocial behaviour officers. We don't really have that. I work quite closely with the 5 housing officers that we have looking after all of our properties, which is quite good, and we get a real flavour of different officers and how they'd work in different patches. And we really found that using sort of GIS mapping has enabled us to create a snapshot of an area that perhaps we don't necessarily know about. We've always just worked in West Oxfordshire, and this is my patch, but I don't necessarily know Gloucestershire. So it allows me just to create a bit more of a snapshot for myself and other officers working in those areas.
Okay, super. And in terms of like investment programs and stuff, what's your kind of general year to year? What in terms of how many groups do you have coming for an investment, or how much you invest into the community?
Yeah, we have our community fund that community groups can apply for. I think we probably get around 13 to 15 of those a year. We've obviously, with COVID, we've seen more of those come up, and we adapted our offer slightly, giving out smaller sums to more people during that period of time. We've been quite fortunate at Cotsway. We've been doing that for probably about 8 years, and luckily our budget has kept going up. Cotsway really see that there's an opportunity for our customers in the community to apply for this money and use this funding. And with us creating that visual map to actually see where the money's going to go towards is really good, because we had noticed that a lot of our funding goes to our neighbourhoods in West Oxfordshire, and we really want to do some more outreach work into those areas that don't necessarily know who Cotsway are, they're not familiar with who we are. So it's really good to have that sort of mapped for us. Yeah,
super. And I think just for people listening, so GIS and community investment, it's probably not, community investment's probably not the first thing you think of when you think GIS in housing. You know, most organisations may have some sort of GIS implementation for asset management, and it sometimes becomes quite stagnant within those departments and doesn't really reach the wider business. But there is like a benefit to utilising GIS across all business areas, and I think community investment and engagement is quite a big one, because one, like you were saying, Sam, about understanding different neighbourhoods and requirements and where you're distributing funds and stuff, and actually having a visualization of that can really support that decision making and that whole process. What I'm going to do now is actually show you what we've set up for Cotsway. Sam might want to chip in with some ways that they've been using it. So just for a bit of background, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, Cotsway actually had the community insight product prior to this. And that was basically a mapping application like a GIS that allows you to see your stock overlaid with different open data sets. So that's a very specific product, you know, dealing with a particular need. And Cotsway were already a client of ODC's with Gizmo, our GIS system that we supply, and our managed services. And what we saw there was an opportunity for them to do more with that. And not just have that data, that kind of static data of their property locations and open data, but also be able to add more to it. Like I say, I'm going to go through that now, and it is at early days. We only started this a few months ago, and it'll be just good to show you what we're actually doing. So I am going to share my screen with you now, and let's load this up. So if I load up the map, so within Cotsway's setup, they've got a general Cotsway map which has all sorts of asset data and grounds maintenance data, etc. And what we've done also is set up this Cotsway Insight map, which, as I say, is bringing in all of those different open data sources. For those that don't know a lot about open data, open data is growing massively. There's more and more organisations publishing data, whether it's local authorities, health authorities, Department for Work and Pensions, etc. And a GIS really is probably the only real tool that you can utilise to actually view that data alongside your own. So, you know, you can have all that information on indices and multiple deprivation and stuff, but until you actually overlay your data along with it, that's when it can start to really paint a picture. So you can see within the application, Cotsway have got all of their property points allocated on the map where they can see where their properties are, and then they've also got all of these different layers that they can view. So things like adults with long-term illness or disability, you've got children living in low-income families, households in fuel poverty, NEETs data or not in education and employment, PIP, performance information, personal independence payment. Yeah, and what we've also just recently put in there as well is some previous grant and funding data. So we've got all the open data, we've got where their properties are, but what we've put in now as well is where they've done some recent grant funds. So they can see where they're funding. These at the moment are themed based on the amount that has been funded, but this could be themed on things like the category of that grant funding. So is it education or health, etc.? And they can click on any of these and it'll give them information about it. And
I wish I'd done that sooner, actually, because I think some of those, I think from the last financial year was split. So there was some COVID related sort of family engagement projects and stuff. It would be really good to actually theme them and see if it's more family activities or environmental projects, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I guess as well as being able to then view that data alongside some of this open data. So we've not got it in at the moment, but if we start bringing in things like the indices and multiple deprivation domains, you'll be able to see, well, where have we got health deprivation, and then where are we previously been investing in health streams. So I don't know if you want to say any more, Sam, about some of the data that's on here at the minute and how you're utilising it at Cotsway.
I think one of the other sort of main objectives, I think we just sort of briefly touched on it. We kind of didn't realise we had this product because obviously other teams were already using it, and we were using Community Insight at the time. And for the purpose of me using Community Insight was to create community plans for particular neighbourhoods. And it's when I realised that we were using it for the grounds maintenance that I was like, why are we using sort of two different systems that could actually really work really well together if we just use the one system? So, for example, I was originally just looking at where we had patches of ground because I was working on a community project and they wanted to work closely with our grounds maintenance. So we were able to see where our grounds maintenance areas were and do a community garden because that's what the local neighbours wanted to do. So it was great just to see where a patch of our ground was. But obviously that's just sort of snowballed into being able to see the open data sets on particular neighbourhoods. So for example, Chipping Norton, you can just see to the north, actually has a very, you know, it's in the papers for being quite an affluent area, but there are pockets, especially when it comes to fuel poverty. And I think we've got not NEETs, not in education, training or employment. And that does create a really good picture for us if we're doing community engagement activities in those areas, because we want to improve people's quality of life, and that's, you know, what we're trying to do. And a lot of that just creates a bit of evidence for us about why we're doing these activities in these areas, and hopefully it will lead for everyone having a kind of a better quality of life, and we're doing activities that actually people want and are going to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you foresee, so we've started this kind of journey of starting to bring in some of your internal data into this, as well as open data sets. Apart from like your neighbourhood plan approach and stuff, how do you see this being utilised for like grant applications and stuff?
I think, like, yeah, for grant applications, like we just said, actually having it themed. So if a grant comes into us, we would give it, you know, it's got a topic, everything's got a topic, we can sort of slot things in. And so being able to create a visual map of how many environmental projects we're doing in a particular area, or perhaps we're giving too much money into one area for one aspect and we need to do a bit of promotion in another. Because obviously from our map you can see that a lot of our work is predominantly done in West Oxfordshire, and we need to be branching out into those outlying areas. So perhaps there is a bit of promotion work we could be doing to say, particularly to areas of sort of Gloucestershire and Cheltenham, that we do have funding available to you, and we could do a bit more of a targeted approach and just see if that generates any sort of interest, and then we can plot those on our map. And that's something that I don't think I need to come to you guys to do. I can do that myself as I go through, and then I'm able just to demonstrate to the organisation, you know, our money that you give us is being used for all our customers and for all our areas that we work in. Really, it's just that justification, isn't it? And, you know, get more bang for your buck, I suppose, and just make sure that the money goes as far as possible, really.
Absolutely. And I think what this also lends itself to is you can actually have this sort of application, whether it's Gizmo like we've got here at Cotsway, or Esri or CAD Corp. You know, you can have actual like customer facing maps as well, where customer groups could actually utilize this as well to see, well, where is the deprivation levels in their area, what are they, and, you know, should they be concentrating a particular project just in one little neighborhood, or could they outreach to you know, adjoining neighborhoods and stuff to really make a bigger impact. So I think it can support not only Cotsway as an organisation, but it can also support those that are kind of those champions, tenant champions, or whoever that are trying to do more in their communities. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have a community a scrutiny panel, and if they were able to have you know, access to it, then they're able to, you know, they are the voice of our greater residents, so it allows them to create a bit of a picture as well. And just being able to visually see it on a map is just much more than checking through stuff on a spreadsheet or getting data through. Just having that visual is more user friendly, I think, for our customers as well, and for myself.
Absolutely. Excellent. And something we've done for some other clients as well, and I'm sure we've been speaking to Cotsway about, is having other layers on here as well, like where are the community centres and schools and church halls, the sort of places that you do maybe community outreach projects, having those as layers, as well as maybe like food banks, where are the food banks? So you start to build this really big picture of your community, what investment is there, what facilities are there already, and that just allows you in your decision making and your kind of steering for projects going forward on what avenues you take. And I think, like you said earlier, Sam, you know, as an organisation, that budget for community investment is always growing, and I think that's across the board in housing associations, really, is that they are profit for purpose organisations, and profits that are being made from like the development arms of businesses and stuff like that is going back not just to the properties, but the communities in which they have the tenant base as well.
Yeah.
So that's great. Anything else that you want to add at all, Sam? Or
no, not really. I'm using it at the moment just to start off as a draft community plan for that Chipping Norton area, and so I'm just sort of starting out. I'm learning as well. I'm not an analyst, you know. I like to look at maps. You know, they're much more appealing to me than spreadsheets when I was having to get reports done for me before. So being able to visually see something and have something that's much more user friendly is definitely makes my job easier. And like I said, we don't have analysts or anyone at Cotsway. It's for staff to operate, and yeah, we've been using it, you know, quite well to start with, but we're very early days, so this is just the start of our journey and where it will take us, really.
Excellent. No, brilliant. And yeah, thanks for your time, Sam, and thanks for sharing that. And hopefully anyone that's watching from community investment teams, etc., then you've got quite a bit out of that, and I'm sure Cotsway would be happy to answer questions or anything.
Absolutely.
If they come through.
Absolutely.
Super. Well, thanks for your time, Sam.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thank you very much for that video from Sam. Just to say, by the way, apologies for the sound at the beginning of that. I know there was a few issues there. So hopefully that's all okay now, and people can have been able to hear the majority of what Sam's video was about. We have got a couple of questions from the audience, so I'm going to start by asking Sam if you can come online. Thanks, Sam. And okay. What questions have we got first? So, are you using GIS yet, Sam, for tracking the impact of the funding in the environment?
Not for the funding as yet. We normally track the impact of our activities when we're hosting the activities ourselves, so we capture that social value. But no, not for our funding at the moment. We've just literally starting out with the mapping. So if we map on where our applications have come in from and what we're giving to people, that's kind of where we're at the moment. But we could certainly see about how we can track that value of what we've done in those areas, because it'll be interesting to see what your impact is in that particular area, especially on a map.
Absolutely. And also another question, what's the biggest benefit you've realised by mapping the funding usage, and has this changed your funding strategy for community investment?
I would say that as soon as we mapped it on there, I was able to see, like, wow, we do predominantly fund in particular areas more than others, and it's helped us with our promotion to those other areas that we work in, just to visually see that we're giving more money to particular areas, because they obviously know much more about what our offer is. They know who Cotsway are, and we need to be doing more work in those other areas so that they know that there's funding available from Cotsway, and to get their applications into us, really. I think when you showed the video on the map, there was only one that was in one of our far outreaching areas, and it was just quite difficult for us to do promotion out there where they don't really know who Cotsway are. So it's just really to help us target people to get their applications into us, really.
Okay, super. Another question we've got, do you find it easier having all that data in one place rather than having, you know, reports on deprivation and stuff alongside your property lists?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I would used to have loads of my favourites box where I could just go and see all the information. So it's really great to have that in one place, and I can change my overlays and stuff, so I can look at different data on there, and just to see it mapped where our properties are as well is just so helpful. And you can just literally pick an area and talk about it and what's happening in that area just really quickly. Then, you know, looking at so much other data that's out there. And we know it's all sort of up to date and ready for us to work with, really, when it's there.
Excellent. And a bit of a generic question, I guess I'll probably answer this one about recommended open data sets. For those listening, open data is getting bigger and bigger, and more and more organisations are publishing open data, whether it be your local authorities, whether it be ambulance services, to hospitals, to education. There's so much data out there. We have compiled a bit of a data list of open data sets which we use for a lot of our housing clients, so we can share that to those on the webinar, no problem. But it's always worth keeping an eye out as well. Things like data.gov.uk, there's all sorts of data on there, and I guess for all this open data that's out there, the only way you can really see it and visualize it against your stock and your data and information is through a GIS. But you can't really do it with spreadsheets and graphs and tables. So hopefully that answers that question. Have we got any more questions for Sam at all before we move on? Okay, well, if there is any more questions that post up, we'll if we've got time, we'll answer them at the end, and if not, we'll I'm sure Sam will be happy to answer them, and we can relay those back to you. So thank you very much, and thank you, Sam.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to go over to David, who is GIS manager at Crosskeys. So we'll go over to his video, and I will make sure I turn my video and microphone off just so we don't have any issues.
Hello, I'm David Beswick. I'm the GIS manager at Crosskeys Homes. I'm just going to give you a quick overview, insight into our GIS implementation. Okay, so what am I going to cover? Well, a brief history of Crosskeys Homes. Then I'm going to have a look at the problems the organisation has and how we intended to resolve those using GIS. Then a bit about the implementation and what benefits we were able to derive and problems we could solve. And just to finish off, what's next in our GIS plan. So, Crosskeys Homes, we're a housing association based out of Peterborough, formed in 2004, following stock transfer from Peterborough City Council. We roughly got about 13,000 properties, and we're continuing to grow. Okay, so Crosskeys was looking to streamline and make efficiency savings, and specifically around ground maintenance and land ownership information, which is all stored on ageing, poorly maintained and inaccessible paper maps and spreadsheets dotted around the organisation, with only a few individuals had access to or knew about, which made things like managing our ground maintenance contract with our supplier and just identifying the land that we owned and what was our responsibility made it all this very problematic and very time consuming. So ultimately the whole idea was to try to get all this information into a form where it can be quickly and easily accessed. Our GIS journey started roughly 2 years ago with the procurement of the Esri suite. We then populated that with the Ordnance Survey Master Map, land registry, land ownership polygons. We geocoded our asset and tenancy systems such they're all spatially aware, and then undertook the exercise of capturing our ground maintenance contract data with support from ODC. Once we had all this put together, we then rolled out the GIS across the organisation, providing a solution to address the ground maintenance and land ownership problems we were having. Has GIS provided benefit? Definitely. Just with these examples here, we found cost savings with our ground maintenance contract value year on year. Accessibility to data, this has provided efficiency savings across the organisation. Just using customer service as an example, they're now able to answer London-based queries raised by our tenants at first point of contact. Data sharing, set up a reciprocal data sharing agreement with Peterborough City Council to share each other ground maintenance data. This has reduced queries on both sides and improved our service. And while some other things, this whole data quality improvement has highlighted anomalies in our stock ownership, and these are items which have now been able to address and get resolved. So GIS is further developed, we'll be able to realise additional benefit, i.e. tenancy engagement. With our area panel and investment consultation work, a map has been worth 1,000 words. For planning, through the analysis of our stock, its location and distribution, we'll be able to better plan future works. Then finally, resource management, as an example being the optimisation of our debt collection routes, which has enabled us to double the number of at-risk tenants we were able to support. Okay, so what's next? Well, the two main areas are, firstly, working with ODC in the capture of T-marks. That's just to support our repairs team with respect to fencing and other boundary issues. The other is CKH property lettings. Here we're looking at developing a right move style map in support of our choice-based lettings programme to ensure prospective tenants are fully informed. Finally, I'd just like to say thanks for listening, and if you've got any queries or questions, please feel free to drop me an email if you'd like later on.
Okay, thank you very much, David. And we've got one or two questions. I don't know if you're coming online, David. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so first question, in terms of what you've done at Cross Keys so far in terms of GIS, how long have you had GIS? And you mentioned about grounds maintenance and potential savings on that contract. Do you know roughly what sort of savings you've had from having the data captured?
Yeah, so I think GIS wise, we procured GIS about 2 years ago now, just over 2 years, and that's really been the story how it started. There was prior to that, when all the stock was covered with by Peterborough City Council, they had GIS. When it came over to Cross Keys, that was lost, and then effectively it got reinstated. So with respect to the ground maintenance data and the contract work we've done, so it's an ongoing, I'll say, discussions with our contractor at the minute. But normally we're saving, I think it's between 30 and 40 grand a year on our maintenance costs.
Okay, super. And in terms of your reach of your GIS, so you've got Esri, Arc Pro. Did you say you've got online as well? How many people access the GIS within the organisation?
Okay, so we're running, I suppose we say running at 2 levels. So we've got ArcGIS Pro, which myself and someone else uses within the organisation for the data creation and management. And then that gets published up to ArcGIS Online, which is available across the organisation. And also, so I'm with the organisation's 400 people, so it's probably about easily accessible to the half of that. And then also to our subcontractors, so for the ground maintenance, ground maintenance subcontractor has access to, and we've also provided web feeds to Peterborough City Council so they can access our data.
Okay, super. And another question, you mentioned about land ownership boundaries, land registry. Did you acquire those or have you had them manually captured from plans?
So we bought the index polygons off Land Registry, and we do their search link. I think it is. There's an annual update that you can apply to give us all the updates. So effectively, we purchased the polygons off Land Registry.
Yeah. Okay. Just to mention on that, the person that asked that question from a Scottish authority. Unfortunately, Mark, the Scottish Land Registry is slightly different, and it's a bit more difficult to obtain land registry title boundaries. You can do it, but it's a bit more long-winded than the way we've it's set up in England at the moment. Okay, and that is it. Anyone else got any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, David. Thanks for your time in putting the video together and for answering the questions. And I'm sure if we get any other questions through, we'll get those responses from you and communicate it to everyone here today. So,
that's brilliant. Thanks for your help.
Thank you. And just to say on behalf of us and everyone, thank you to all the presenters today. Unfortunately, Paul isn't around to answer those questions that we had before, so we will put those to Paul. And if you've got any other questions for any of the presenters, please post them in here. What I'm going to do now is just go through a few other bits with you, really, just to give you a bit more variety. So in terms of, let me load this up. So in terms of GIS in housing, what we're trying to do with these webinars is cover as many business areas as we possibly can. You know, today you've seen from asset management and community investment to a general, David being a GIS manager, he of course serves GIS services to the whole organisation. But I think it's important to say really that GIS can be utilised in pretty much every department within housing. I know when I was a GIS officer at a housing organisation, I pretty much touched every department in, you know, providing GIS services to them. So, you know, as I said earlier, asset management are always kind of the first department that generally gets a GIS if they do. And then sometimes it just kind of sits within asset management and doesn't really serve the rest of the business. And I guess that's down to just knowledge really within housing of how GIS can be used across the board. So development, there's lots of opportunity. Housing and estate services. On the estate services side, David mentioned about like grounds maintenance capture and utilising that for actually making cost savings. And on average, a client that has their grounds maintenance data captured and then subsequently go out to tender for that service can save between 10 and 15% on their grounds maintenance contract. So you can make substantial savings just on having that digital data that allows you to accurately advise those bidding for that work exactly your square meterage of grass and hard standing, etc. So you can really work it out. And of course, that then leads on to like site services as well. What I'm going to do is just go through a few of these today. Just because we haven't got very long. So I might spend 5 or so minutes on this and then open up to any questions you may have. So development teams, I guess these are kind of common themes that we get involved in for development arms of businesses. So title plans, that's a very popular thing in that, you know, you have a right to buy title plan that you will get at the moment. If you've not got GIS within the organisation or GIS aren't involved in it, the chances are you're probably getting solicitors to do these, and they can be quite costly for what they are. Utilising GIS to do it is actually a real quick win, and it's a really quick way of making financial savings within an organisation. And you know, one of the things that I'd always say to maybe put on a business case for GIS if you've not got one already. Site feasibility. So we saw with like community investment, being able to see all these open data sets. If you imagine some of those open data sets alongside where you're potentially looking at development opportunities and bringing that data in, like indices and multiple deprivation, but then also looking at more kind of property management focused in terms of current tenure types in that area, current property types, the population demographics. You know, so if you know you've got a highly concentrated area of young professionals, but there aren't actually many flats or, you know, alternative housing for them, they're all 3-bed semis in that area or something that, you know, a young professional may not be able to afford, then that might be a good way of looking at, well, actually that could be an opportunity there for building flats, etc. Also, there's price paid data, so you can see how much properties have sold for in an area. So you can look at potential return on investment if you're going down an open market sale route. So that's good to see. Just as well, having an overview of development sites. Where are all your sites? What stage are they at? Community engagement around those sites, so using GIS for that. Providing location profiles, so, you know, for that development, what's your transport links like? What's the closest school, and what's the Ofsted report for that school? So I guess when you get to that point of, actually, we're then going to either try and rent it out as a new affordable let, or you're going to try and sell it, then having as much information around the location as possible to really sell it to them. Mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures, as we know, a lot of this is going on. You know, whether it's small organisations combining to become bigger, or big ones swallowing up smaller ones, and all sorts of things. GIS can actually be really beneficial in that kind of strategic view of seeing, well, what other organisations have stock within my area, and or where have we got properties that are quite outlying, not, you know, within a large estate, and it may be that we do stock swaps and stuff like that, and GIS can really benefit you in that way. And I guess in terms of housing services, you've got patch demand, so being able to look at housing officer patches and doing that based on demand and geography to enable better, more kind of focused patches that allows the best in terms of journey times, but also allows for all, I guess, housing officers to have a similar workload balance. You know, because if you just focus on geography, you can end up where actually you know, you've got estates where there are much higher demand on you as a service than other estates. So actually combining all these factors can really help plan for better housing officer patches. That actually works for like arrears officer patches as well, and repairs patches if you've got an in-house repairs team. Lettings profiles, we spoke about these in our last webinar. You should be able to download our last webinar still, actually, where organisations are creating basically profiles for all of their properties, where you can see, as we've talked about for development, seeing what's the local school services that are available in that area, and just being able to have more information to help with those hard to let properties or new properties where, you know, you might have a housing officer that's new to the organisation and they don't really know the area quite as well as what the predecessor did. So that can really help. Rent arrears, looking at hotspots of rent arrears and how you can potentially tackle initiatives there. Complaints data, viewing that in a geographical way to see if there is hotspots, concentrations that, you know, are aligned to other geographical factors. GM data capture and service charge setting, as I mentioned about grounds maintenance data already, but just having that grounds maintenance data on a map that staff can access allows people to answer queries so much quicker. If you can imagine having your grounds maintenance data on a map that's accessible for housing officers on the ground, that a tenant comes to them and says, what's happening about this piece of lawn here that's not been cut in ages, they can answer there and then, do we own it? Yes, we do own it, I'll get onto the case. Or no, we don't actually. You're probably best speaking to the local authority or finding out who the owner of that land is. And then site services capture. So it doesn't just have to end with grounds maintenance and grass and stuff, but any kind of estate service. So whether it's lights, lampposts, CCTV, you know, benches, walls and fences, anything really that's on the ground can be captured. And then ASB analysis and exclusion zones as well, looking at ASB hotspots and where you can do joint initiatives with your local police or constabulary to look at those joint initiatives around ASB. So, you know, it is very, very varied. There's lots I could talk about. I'm not going to now. Hopefully we'll be doing another webinar in the near future. But yeah, that's how I'll leave it for today. And hopefully everyone's got a lot out of this. In terms of questions, let me just stop the slide. Okay, so questions, let me have a look. So I've not got any further questions. I'll leave it open for a minute if anyone has got any questions. While I'm waiting for that, just to something that's becoming quite hot topic around kind of asset surveys. Asset surveys are becoming quite a monster of a thing now for organisations, whether it's condition surveys or risk hazards and stuff like that. GIS is being utilised across housing organisations now for this, because it means you don't have to change loads of things in your housing management system. It allows you to collect data out in the field and show it on a live map as soon as you've captured it. I know a few organisations that are doing this at the moment. Also, one of our speakers at our last webinar was talking about like internal structures as well, and looking at internal floor plans for like high risk buildings, like sheltered schemes or flat blocks, etc., and being able to see the structure of the different floor plans. And GIS is evolving all of the time, and yeah, that's quite I think that GIS is getting involved in a lot now. We've had one post from someone on that said they've actually did their grounds maintenance data, and by doing recent updates to that, they found that they were being overcharged by about £50,000. And I guess that is basically because if you've not got this sort of capture done, then what you find when you go out to tender, if you're just sending a list of sites, they've got no idea about the size and quantities. That you know they'll go and inspect maybe 5-10% of those sites and to give you a price, but they have to put in so much contingency just in case there's a site they've not looked at that's huge. And so by doing a data capture exercise, it really narrows it down. It doesn't give them, you know, they don't have the opportunity there to then start putting a load of contingency in. They need to give you the best price possible. And that's where a lot of housing organisations start on their GIS journey, is through doing like a grounds maintenance data capture, and then it alludes to lots of other things. So yeah, thank you very much for all the questions today. Thank you for joining us. As I mentioned at the start, we will send out a link to this webinar, so you can share it amongst your organisation and share it amongst colleagues. If you've got any questions, feel free to send them over to us. and we'll do our best to answer them ourselves, or if they're for one of the presenters today, we'll pass them on and get those answers over to you. So yeah, thank you for your time, and I hope you've got something out of it. So thank you.